I've always considered Conor Oberst of the legendary indie folk band Bright Eyes to be a true poet. He's not only one of my favorite songwriters of all time, but many besides myself rank him among the greatest of his time. His current work with Phoebe Bridgers is great, and the fact that Bright Eyes is back together is absolutely exciting, but I personally think that it will be nearly impossible for Conor Oberst to recreate the magic that he harnessed on Bright Eyes' fourth studio album, depending on how you count the double release and everything. I'm wide awake, it's morning. The way that Bright Eyes managed to capture the sheer melancholy of the life and depression that Oberst was living within during this time is nothing if not extremely powerful. However, I think part of the reason that this album is so impactful to so many people is that it provides profound commentaries in a number of areas that are not strictly biographical to Conor, such as discussions on topics like nihilism, relationships, loneliness, politics, protesting, and quite a bit of critique to 20th century American capitalism, all through Conor's point of view. But the backbone to this album's true impact comes from the sheer emotion and pain that is ever so apparent in absolutely everything that Conor says within these 10 tracks. The album opens with At the Bottom of Everything and its iconic vocal passage intro that recounts the story of a plane crash. This song sets the tone for things to come, as it introduces the reoccurring theme of Conor's hatred of the American capitalist lifestyle and the role that it plays in his individual struggles. As the plane crashes down toward the ocean, a man sings a folk tune about American conformity to a neighboring passenger. We must memorize 9 numbers and deny we have a soul. He doesn't hold back on this track. What follows in We Are Nowhere and It's Now is a recount of Conor's depression and overall nihilistic view of life.
And if you swear that there's no truth, and who cares, how come you say it like you're right?
And the things around him, which he also expresses on track number 3, Old Soul Song for the New World Order.
And there were barricades to keep us off the street, but the crowd kept pushing forward till they swallowed the police. Yeah, they went wild.
Except this time, the nihilism seems to be less biographically rooted and more systematically rooted, as this essentially serves as a protest song. However, it doesn't seem like Conor has much faith in this protest. We left before the dust had time to settle, and all the broken glass swept off the avenue. On the way home, I held your camera like a Bible, wishing so bad that it held some kind of truth. And I stood nervous next to you in the dark room. You drop the paper in the water, and it all begins to bloom. Despite the developing photos, Conor doesn't seem to think that anything will change. The way I perceive it, First Day of My Life is by far the most positive song on the project. Here, Conor details a hypothetical life where he is saved by a significant other who cures him of his problems with existential questioning, his depression, and his substance abuse issues. These things take forever. I especially am slow, but I realized that I need you, and I wondered if I could come home. He seems to be longing for a life where people lay blankets on the beach. Then he comes crashing down into reality with the tragic, landlocked blues.
You walk away, I'll walk away. First tell me which road you will take. I don't wanna risk our paths crossing someday. So you walk that way, I'll walk this way.
Which details a heartbreak. As Conor leaves his lover in a spotlit, powerful, and heart-wrenching fashion, he attempts to find solace in the phrase, "If you love something, give it away." But no matter how hard he tries, he seems unable to cure himself of heartbreak through any means but his vice of alcohol. I found myself a liquid cure for my landlocked blues. He comes to the conclusion that himself and his lover are just not good for each other. Although the next track, Poison Oak, is sung in second person and therefore is most likely a hypothetical scenario, many think it recounts a suicide. One of the most chilling things that Oberst says in this song is, "And I fell asleep with you still talking to me. You said you weren't afraid to die." All signs point to this being the end of the overall story. Poison Oak ends with what sounds like organs, symbolically representing a funeral. Our protagonist has fallen, and therefore we reach our conclusion in Road to Joy.
The sun came up with no conclusions, flowers sleeping in their beds, the city cemeteries humming, I'm wide awake, it's morning.
Which begins with the same sequence of organs that Poison Oak ends with. However, these organs are disguised at a different pitch. This song is a play on Beethoven's Ode to Joy and seemingly is a string of advice on how to live a life that pursues the road to joy. Oberst concludes the album with, "The sun came up with no conclusion, flowers sleeping in their beds, the city cemetery is humming, I'm wide awake, it's morning." I think I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning is one of the most emotionally potent albums of the last decade. Conor says a lot on this album in the form of borderline poetry, so it becomes hard to boil this album's message down to one specific subject matter, but I think his main point is rooted in a strange mix of optimism and nihilism. Conor Oberst is sad, but somewhere in the midst of his commentary on 21st century capitalism, he finds a way to instill the slightest sense of optimism within his listeners. But he does so in a way that isn't self-reflective, but rather it seems as if Oberst tells his stories in a melancholic fashion, predicated on the merit that he doesn't want others to feel like he is. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning more or less still employs Oberst's nihilistic worldview, but in comparison to his earlier work, this album seems to have a silver lining of sorts, due to it ending in a track like Road to Joy. Conor Oberst can't find his road to joy, but it seems as if he really wants you to try and find yours.